Hello, everybody. Today's interview is focused more on the practical nature of bringing a book to market, finding an agent, leaving an agent, finding a second agent, and the different moments that could happen along your publishing journey. Also, at the end, we talk about different ways authors can give back to their community, including mentorship programs and organizing the creation of an anthology using Kickstarter to help fund that goal. I hope you enjoy. Hello, thank you everybody for joining us today. Today we are joined by M. Stevenson. M. Stevenson is a graduate of Brown University and the University of Idaho and has worked as an outdoor educator, wilderness skills instructor, and science teacher. Her poetry and prose have appeared in publications including Small Wonders, Podcastle, Barely South, The Florida Review, and Poets Reading the News. Her debut novel, Behooved, is out on May 20th, 2025. Behooved is described as a charming, slow burn romantasy featuring a duty-bound noblewoman with chronic illness, a prince who would rather be in a library than on a throne, and a magical ride through a world of cozy enchantment. The back of book blurb reads, Bianca knows her duty comes before her heart, so when the threat of war looms, she agrees to marry the neighboring kingdom's heir. But not all royal weddings are a fairy tale, and Prince Arik, Bianca's betrothed, is cold, aloof, and seems to hate her on sight. To make matters worse, on their wedding night, an assassination attempt goes awry, leaving Arik magically transformed into a horse. Bianca does what any bride would do in this situation. She mounts her new husband and rides away to safety. Sunset returns Arik to human form, but they soon discover the assassination attempt is part of a larger plot against the throne. Worse, Bianca has been framed for Arik's murder, and she's now saddled with a husband who is a horse by day and frustratingly attractive by night. As an unexpected romance begins galloping away with their hearts, Bianca and Arik must rely on each other to unravel the curse and save the throne. So, just to start us off, where did you get the idea for this book?
The idea for this one, I feel like with books, it's often really hard to pinpoint, but I actually can for Behooved because it came from the title. I was brainstorming like titles for something else, and then the word Behooved came up, and I was thinking about like the potential double meanings of the word, and it all kind of spiraled from there.
There are a lot of horse puns in that summary. Did you get
There
to
are, yeah.
have any interaction with like creating that summary, or was it just a giggle when you got it in the your email?
I did, yeah. So part of it is actually based off of my query for this book. And then I did have a hand in the final description as well. So it's fairly similar to like what my query was like, but my editor contributed a few of those as well. And yeah, I had a fair bit of input. The horse puns have definitely been like part of the marketing too, which is really fun.
Well, it's got to be fun. I mean, there's a little bit of a tongue in cheek in it, but it's also it keeps that lighthearted energy with everything, and it's very silly, but it also kind of it pulls into the story. I'm wondering, like, for me, when I was first reading the backup book blurb, it reminded me a lot of Swan Lake in a way, where you have a love interest who turns into an animal at night, and or rather, vice versa, who becomes themselves at night. Was that any type of inspiration, or how did you get that particular transition going?
I think not directly inspired by Swan Lake, although I will confess that I really loved the Swan Princess as a child. So it doesn't really surprise me when people mention like some of my like childhood loves because it apparently I'm just, a collection of them in a trench coat.
That happens.
Um, yeah, I think like both like animal spouses and also like the day-night transformation are kind of a classic fairy tale trope. And I really love fairy tales, so that also came from that. But part of it was also like practicalities of I knew it wanted to be a romance, and I was like, well, he can't be a horse the entire time because that'd just be too weird. So like I was thinking about like day and night because I kind of wanted to tie it to that because I love the symbolism. And I think I landed on the day versus night as like that is a suitable period of time in which to, be a man, but also be a horse and have things be awkward.
If it's spoilers, please feel free to tell me that you can't talk about it. But I imagine if I suddenly got turned into a horse, walking those first few steps would be a little bit awkward as you suddenly have four limbs. What was that initial transformation when you are first describing it for the characters? How does that come on page?
So the book is told entirely from Bianca's point of view. So we don't get into Eric's head at all, but there is definitely a bit of a transition period where they're figuring out what's going on. And it's also during the middle of an assassination attempt, so there's quite a lot happening.
Very difficult to figure out your horsiness when you're trying to avoid being murdered. So when did you first decide that you were going to sit down and write this book?
This book, I think 2022, like early 2022, like maybe around March. Actually,
And
it was probably earlier than that, but sometime in that like spring.
and what gave you the idea like you're going to write this book and then you're going to push it for publication?
So at the time, I was actually querying a different book because I didn't have an agent at that point. And I was working on a different work in progress that I had planned to like be my next, querying book if the other one didn't work out. But then like the idea for this one popped into my head, and I just got so carried away with it that I just decided to like that I had to write it. So I just sat down and it poured out of me in about 3 months for the first draft, which was the fastest that I'd ever written a draft at that point because I was also working full time.
How do you juggle that? I mean, like you said you were working full time. For people who are also working full time, what type of writing schedule were you doing in that moment?
Yeah, so I at the moment I have the luxury of writing as my full-time job since Behooved sold. But most of the books that I've written were written while working full-time. So I was a teacher while I wrote most of my books. So I know a lot of people do like the 5 a.m. writers thing. I did not do that because I had to be at work at 7:30, so that was already plenty early. So I mostly wrote after dinner. So I would, get home from work and, exercise for a bit, collapse for a bit. And then after eating dinner, I would sit down for about an hour roughly, which is about as much as I could manage before I was too exhausted and just kind of do what I could.
How long was Behooved, or has the page count differed from when you first wrote it to the final finished product?
Yeah, it's changed a lot. The first draft, I think, ended up at around 74,000 words. When I queried it, it was 88,000, and it's currently the final draft is 98,000.
And so let's say 3 months for this first initial 70,000 or so. Were you surprised by that length? Like you said, you did it straight through. Like, were you surprised when you were finished it, this is the amount it was? And then afterwards, were you surprised that it kept getting bigger throughout the different editing phases?
That seems to be a pretty typical progression for me, where my first drafts are usually at least 15,000 words shorter than the next draft. So at that point, because this was the seventh manuscript I'd finished, I wasn't too terribly surprised by that process.
Fair enough. What usually gets added into those next 15,000 words?
A lot. I mean, part of it is filling in plot and world building, because I figure out a lot of that stuff while I'm doing the first draft. But I think my first drafts just tend to be pretty sparse in general. So, like, I'll add a lot of internality and emotion and description and that sort of thing, and just kind of lengthen all of the emotional beats as well.
When you're first like doing those first drafts, are you somebody who just sits down and just straight writes, or do you edit while you're doing it?
I don't do a lot of editing while I'm drafting. I will like go back and read the section that I had just finished the day before, and like occasionally like I will make a few tweaks to that to kind of get myself back into the voice before I start drafting, but I don't really make big revisions. I'll do a lot of bracketing where it's like, fix this later, this thing happens here, etc.
Fair enough. You said that the entire book is in Bianca's perspective. What about her tone of voice really clicked with you while you decided this is the voice you were going to go with?
I really like writing in first person because of like the limited viewpoint. And for this particular book, I mean, I also write in third person sometimes, but for this one, I knew it had to be limited for some of the reveals to happen, because there's a lot that is going on that she doesn't understand. So having it from like a dual point of view, for instance, really wouldn't work because it would give away a lot of the tension. And one of the things that I also really love about first person is that it allows you to have like your character to have such a flawed understanding of the world and of themselves. And there's a lot of like learning and growing that she does throughout the book. So like having that limited perspective is really fun for me.
No, I definitely think it's fun as well, like just reading it. And there's so many different ways that you can read with the different point of views. But when you do have that limited perspective, it gives you that chance to be like, all right, I'm only in this person's head. And then you get to discover with the character instead of being, aware when the character isn't and trying to rush them forward.
Yeah, totally.
Um, were there any books that you were reading around the same time that were helping you with inspiration or giving you any uh even just tone of voice or anything like that that was encouraging you as you were drafting?
Not like direct inspirations, but the romance and in particular the scenes. I definitely got a lot of inspiration from the last Binding trilogy by Freya Marske. And for the relationship, I also had some inspirations in Winter's Orbit, which is a sci-fi romance. So it's not like there was anything directly pulled by that, but like with the last Binding trilogy in particular, I confess that like before reading that, I hadn't typically enjoyed reading scenes because they just kind of feel like, a lot of the time, like, tab A goes into slot B, etc. But what Freya Marsk does with the character building and the relationship building during those, I found really inspiring. So I wanted to achieve that sort of effect in mine.
Having not had a chance to read your book, I'm interested in seeing that comparison when it eventually does come out, which is not too long from now. Are you excited for its launch?
I am, yeah.
Are you have anything planned for it, or is it just stay at home with your family?
So I know that there's going to be a launch event at my local independent bookstore, which I'm excited for. And I'm kind of planning some things like I want to have, some swag to give away and whatnot. But I
Lovely.
don't know all the details yet because my publicist is handling most of that stuff.
Always good to have a team. Saves you from having to do all the details yourself.
Yeah.
So when you finished your 3 months, you've got your 77 or 74,000 words that you had. What was your process before you went into the querying? Did you do a full edit beforehand, or did you just say, this is my draft, I'm going to take it out?
Yeah, I did multiple edits. So I did a second draft pretty quickly after that. I sent it to a bunch of beta readers. And then I didn't end up querying this book initially because I got an agent offer on the book that I'd been querying before that. So we went on submission with that other book, and then Behooved kind of sat on the shelf for a bit while we were on submission. My previous agent, because Maddy is actually my second agent that I'm on right now, my previous agent was not interested in working on Behooved. So I eventually parted ways with that agent, and then I, had this draft that was sitting that was ready to go, and this was 2023 at that point, and Romantasy was kind of starting to take off. So it's like, well, I have this book that kind of fits the trend. Like this seems to be what people are looking for. It's finished. I've edited it, so I gave it one more edit, and then I started querying with it.
What was your new querying process like? Because you had parted ways with the previous agent. Was that something that you were disclosing while you were contacting people for those who aren't familiar with how to manage going from one agent to another?
Yeah, I did disclose that. I'm not sure if it helped or not, but I don't think that it hurt. And I wanted to disclose, that I'd been on submission with another book, but not this one. So I put something in my query letter that was the line was something like, I was previously represented by agency and we have amicably parted ways.
Fair enough. And then full disclosure for listeners, M. Stevenson and I do share an agent who I personally think is the best agent in the world. It's Maddy Belton. What for you personally, why did you decide to go with this particular agent?
Um, Honestly, I don't know exactly when I learned about Maddie, but I feel like I'd seen a lot of like agency announcements from her like before I started querying. Like I had a couple of friends who had signed with her, like another client, Jules Sarbo, is a friend, and it seemed like she was signing some really incredible books. So she was like one of the very first agents that I queried, and I also like kind of liked that it was a fresh start because this was not the first book that I had queried. Maddie, I don't think had actually been agenting for like when I was querying any of my previous books. So I was like, new agent, great agency. Seems like she's signing some really cool people, so I will give her a try. I don't know. It's just vibes largely, honestly.
It is largely vibes, and she does have some great vibes. So,
Yeah.
shout out to Maddie, of course, but also to anybody who's interested in querying, definitely give it a shot. Um, Once you did sign with Maddie, though, what was your journey like from transitioning from, all right, now I have an agent on this book. Now we're going on submission. Were there rounds of edits beforehand? Did you immediately go on submission? What was your time frame like?
So I signed with Maddie in August of 2023, and we did kind of three rounds of edits. One of them was really big, and then we did like some smaller tweaks. So like the big one, I ended up like revising something like three-quarters of the book, so it was pretty large. And then after a couple rounds of edits, we went on submission in January 2024. And I was prepared to, be in the for a long wait because that's mostly what you hear about submission, and that's what I had experienced before. So I was like, okay, I'll work on something else in the meantime. And then 2 days later, she was like, hey, do you have time for a call? Because we have an offer.
That's probably the fastest I've personally heard. I'm sure it's very fast for everybody else. What was your reaction when you got that call?
I was just really excited. I was kind of like, it's finally happening. Like I've been working towards this for, over a decade at that point. So I was just very excited.
When you have those types of calls, there's a lot of information that you're given all at once. Did you immediately take some time? Did you immediately have a response of what you wanted to do with it? How did you react or how did you process the information of getting that offer?
It was very, very fast. Because the offer that I got, so I initially got an offer from Hotterscape in the UK, which is my UK publisher, and it was a preempt, which basically means that they are offering you some amount of money and you have to accept it really fast. So we had a 24-hour deadline to say yes or no, which is pretty fast to process. So there was some back and forth with Maddie about whether we should accept it or whether we should, try and see if the book could go to auction because she thought there might be enough interest. And she did some more negotiating on the preempt as well. So we ended up deciding to go with the preempt. And, I was largely just, like, whatever you say, agent, I don't really know anything about this. But it was a good offer. It's a great publisher. They have put out a lot of like really amazing fantasy and also like romance and sci-fi titles. So it seemed like a really good home for the book.
Do you also have a North American publisher or is it just with Hotterscape?
I do also have a North American publisher, yes.
What's the difference between getting the offer for the UK side and then also getting the offer for North America?
It's really just the rights of where it's published. So I have two editors because so after the we accepted the UK preempt, Maddy then nudged the US editors and we got another preempt. So I had, two different book deals for the same book within a week. So the US and the UK are working very closely together on it. I get edits from both of my editors. And so it's basically like one edit letter, one set of edits. And the main difference is just, who's publishing it where. So in the US, it's published by Bramble, which is an imprint of Tor, and in the UK, it's published by Hotterscape.
For people who aren't aware, what is it like when you have multiple editors? You said they work together, but what does that actually like practically look like in your inbox? Are you getting multiple things from multiple people? Is it one key person who's kind of managing it behind the scenes? How do you practically work with multiple people on the book?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think most of it, my editors manage themselves behind the scenes. Like I know they have calls about their edits and such. So on my end, it mostly looks like I get one email with a lot of people CC'd.
Yeah, I think that's also been my experience where it's like, here's one thing, one document, but everybody's in CC, so we're all having the same type of conversation.
Mhm.
Do you find that to be easier so that you just like one person needed to deal with all the CCs, or would you prefer to have more? Otherwise, it's more of a work type question.
It gets confusing with who to email about certain things sometimes. I think it's interesting. I don't think it's typically like usual that you have two editors who are like giving you joint edits. I think often like one of them will be the lead publisher and the other just kind of takes them. I mean, it's been an interesting process in particular trying to figure out like what the second book in the contract is because there's two different editors who have different, things that they're drawn to. So that's been an ongoing conversation.
So you have a second book for your contract. How does was that associated with Behooved, where it said here's Behooved plus another, or what type of preempt negotiation discussion was involved with that?
Yeah, basically what you said. So, we want to buy Behooved plus another book that is unspecified.
Fair enough. For people who aren't familiar, when they say unspecified, is it just come up with anything, or what is your timeline or budget or deadlines that you need to give for that type of stuff?
So in the contract, it does have deadlines for it, but in practice, those are not the actual deadlines. So, I mean, I've been through a bit of a process with book two at the moment where what they initially thought they wanted as book two is not what's going to be book two. So it's still to be determined what that is going to be.
Yes, publishing is renowned for being very different and unique for most people involved, and deadlines are more flexible than you might imagine.
Yeah, I think especially because it is a multi-book deal, but Behooved is a standalone.
Yeah.
So I think if people have a series, then it's more often the second book is book two in the series, though not always.
Yeah,
Um,
it kind of depends, I think, on how well the first one does or what the general vibe is for how long things are. I've heard different people say different things on that.
yeah, it depends, the classic word of publishing.
Yes, everything is very flexible, and everything's made up, and the points don't matter. Is kind of how I feel like a lot of stuff with publishing is, where it's very unique to the individual experience at times. While some things are pretty similar, there's always a little bit of flexibility. You said that with Maddy, you had like three-quarters of the book that you completely redid. Was there a similar long haul overhaul type deal when you were working with your editors as well?
And the edits from my editors were a lot lighter on Behoove. So I think I ended up making edits to like every page in the book, but the actual edits were not anywhere near as heavy. It was more like a lot of the things they wanted were like deepening some of the subplots or like deepening some of the relationships. So it ended up being a lot of words added, but none of them were like complete rewrites.
Fair enough. Um, for those three-quarters that you of the book that you did redo with Maddie, what were those like?
It was fun. I think, it sounded really daunting when she gave me the initial edits, but I think one of the things that I really love about revising is when you can see how much better it's going to be when you've implemented them. So it was really exciting to me to go through and like make it's a much better book now than it was when it was being queried.
Yeah, I feel like she has a tendency to do that where she sees it and she's like, all right, this is what we can do. And she always kind of refines it a little bit more and more until now it's good. But I think that makes it easier too. If you have an agent that is a little bit more editorial focused, I think it makes the actual publishing editing a little bit easier because you've already done a huge amount of work to begin with, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, totally.
What has been for you, the most exciting part of this process? And then also what has been the most difficult part of this process?
Most exciting, I think, was definitely getting the initial offer. Because especially after, working towards that for so long, because I started careering back in like 2014, so it's been a long haul. And I was so excited when I got the offer that like I have like a fitness watch and I'd gone through all my steps in the day by now. Yeah, most difficult part I think has been get like being perceived, I guess. Um, as I was writing for myself like for publication, but only me and like people that I sent the book to were seeing it for so long. So it's really different, like, with arcs going out and random people can read it and I get tagged in reviews and like, it's very different.
It is very different. Did you have a bit of a social media presence before, or was that something that you had to develop while you were embarking on the publishing journey?
That is something I started developing while I was querying. So like I have, separate author accounts from personal. And I forget exactly when I set those up, but sometime when I was like, I'm trying to get published. I've definitely been a lot more active on them recently because, I actually have stuff to talk about now.
Is it difficult to do the balance and the juggle of personal and then also professional?
Not terribly because honestly, I'm just not very active on my personal accounts and I never have been. I think where it does get confusing is because Stevenson is a pen name. Occasionally I get confused about like which person I am, especially when I'm, talking to people about my book who know me as, not M. Stevenson.
I feel like there's a lot of pressure, or at least I see a lot of pressure that newer writers put on themselves and feel as if they are being instructed from others that they have to have a huge social media following. They have to be like really invested in all of the, the online things. They have to have, the influencer status if they're ever going to get published. Is that something that you agree with, or is that something that, yes, you're building a online platform now, but it's not necessarily a requirement. How do you feel about that particular aspect of it?
I think for me, it's more been about building community than about like building followers, is how I've approached it. So, like, I've made a lot of writing friends, through social media, especially before Twitter crashed. Um, I do think it's helpful to have a social media presence as an author, but I don't really think that like the huge followings, I mean, for one, it's really hard to get a following that's that big, but I don't think that that's really a key factor in getting like book deals and getting an agent, at least not right now, and at least not for fiction. I think it's quite different for nonfiction. But
Some of the things that I definitely have seen on your account is you'll post cover art, you'll post character art sometimes. You've got snippets. What are the things that you really like to engage with in general when you're promoting your book, or what things do you particularly enjoy to actually share with that community?
good question. I think that I like sharing things that I didn't do the most. So like with the cover art, it's not my art, so I just get to share this beautiful cover that was made for the book. Um, yeah, it's been exciting to share like some of the reviews that it's getting. Like it got a starred review from Publishers Weekly and just recently from Library Journal, so that was really exciting to share. Um, yeah, I have never actually shared snippets until really recently. Like that's just never been something that I've shared from books. But I guess, now that people can actually read it, it feels a bit safer, I guess.
How do you choose a snippet? Whenever I go through my book, I'm like, where do I start the snippet? Where do I end the snippet? What is the formula for finding the best part?
I don't really know, honestly. I've only shared like two snippets. One thing I did do when I was doing past pages, which for folks who don't know, that's basically like the proofreading stage. I ended up highlighting a lot of lines that I liked. With the thought that I could use them for snippets. So then I like made a Word document of some of those, although honestly I lost track like partway through because I was like, this is just too much work. So it's only like 10 snippets in the Word document, but I'm like, that's plenty of social media posts, right?
Oh, I would think so. And I think it's also a good idea, like while you're reading your book, to be able to say, okay, this is a good thing, this is a good thing, so that you have those in advance where going back after the fact might be more challenging.
Yeah, I think if I were doing it again, I would have like transferred those into a different document while I was reading it instead of just like underlining them on the printed page because that would have saved a lot of work. But I guess now I know for next time.
Now you know for next time, it's always learning experience in every part of this industry.
Yeah, I think a lot of the social media stuff is just an experimentation for me because I don't really know what gets engagement. I don't really know what people are looking for. A lot of it is just subject to the algorithm. It seems like people like it when I post about the book, like a lot more than like when I post about what I'm reading, for instance. But I don't really know why.
It's a mystery. I'm sure there are people out there who are extraordinarily smart and clever and can give much better answers than I could. I don't know either. But I know that it's something that a lot of folks get really concerned about, and it's kind of sad sometimes when you're on Twitter or Blue Sky or wherever and you see people getting really nervous about, I need to get a social media following. And I've also seen a lot of folks that don't have any social media followings that do get wonderful agents and book deals and go from there. And so I do think that there's some sort of balance between absolutely nothing and the most people ever and finding that comfort level.
Yeah, for sure.
Um, One thing that I know that you also do is that you're a mentor and you have all these different things throughout the year, sometime of working with new writers as they're developing their craft. What is that experience like?
I really love it. I think part of it comes from, being a teacher and like that's just always something that's, that I've liked doing. But with the mentorship, so I'm a mentor for Roundtable Mentor, which is a free mentorship that focuses on marginalized writers in particular. So like we take applications from anybody, but like the goal is to have at least 50% mentors, or sorry, mentees and mentors who are people of color. And we also prioritize other marginalizations as well. So yeah, it's really fun. I think the most difficult part is reading applications because I don't like saying no, especially if I know that I could help. But I have two mentees at the moment. I was supposed to have one. I'm bad at saying no. Yeah, so it's really great. I get to, read somebody's book and give them notes on it and feel like I'm, passing the ladder back down to help people get towards their publishing goals.
What type of advice is usually involved in mentorship?
I think a lot of it is individual to the book, and the writing skills that like each author could improve on. But more generally, there's also a lot of information about just navigating publishing and querying. And I think it's just helpful to, have mentors who have been through it and who have gotten an agent who can, talk to people who might just be starting about what to expect and how to strategize.
So, do you do mentorship for full books, for query letters only? What type of stuff? So, if somebody wanted to join this mentor program in the future, what should they be thinking about?
Yeah, it is for full books. So everybody applies with like one manuscript in, whatever age category and genre it is. We got a lot of fantasy applications both this year and last year, which is not super surprising. I think a lot of people write fantasy. Um, and yeah, so they submit like a query letter, a synopsis, a short pitch of the book, and then the manuscript, some sample pages. So then the mentors can either request the full or just, decide based off of the sample pages from there. But I do read the entire book. I'm going to be doing probably 3 rounds of revision with each of my mentees, which is this is my second year mentoring, so that's what I did last year as well.
What type of time commitments involved with that? It sounds like a lot.
It is, yeah. I think the biggest time commitment in like a small chunk is reading the applications, especially like with reading the full manuscripts, because I have a really hard time limiting myself to requesting only a few. I think I requested 5 this year. So that's, 5 entire manuscripts to read during the application time frame. Um, but the program itself is basically a 9-month program. So I think that's really nice in some ways because it gives a lot of space for everybody to kind of tailor their experience to what they want. Like there are guideposts for, this is roughly when we have the check-ins and such. But, I've told my mentees if they want to go faster, we can go faster. If they want to take more time on revisions, that's fine too.
If there's an author who's listening who would like to become a mentor, what would that process be like?
There's an application on the website that should be opening for our next round of mentors in October.
Oh, good to know. I will put the link in the description for anybody who's interested in checking that out then.
Awesome. Yeah, it's a really great program. And I love the community of mentors as well. Some of our mentors this year were actually mentees last year, which is really cool.
Oh, wonderful. Which, if I'm understanding the process correctly, they started because they're trying to get an agent, and now it seems that they were agented after their mentor process.
Yes, some of them also have book deals as well.
Fantastic. We love it. Um, Other things I know you're involved with is that you're also doing an anthology that's coming out. Can you give any information about that? I think there's a Kickstarter going on right now.
Yes, so one of my writing friends, CJ Subko, and I, we are both speculative fiction writers, so we write, a wide range of stuff under science fiction, fantasy, and horror. And we had been talking about doing some sort of anthology for a while, and we are making it happen, which is a really fun distraction from other publishing stuff because, there's a lot more control there. So yeah, it's called Enter Here. It's an anthology of portals. So the theme of the anthology is A Door Opens. We have 4 contributors that we invited who are really amazing writers, and the rest of the submissions or the stories will come from an open submission pool, assuming that, we get funded for it, but we're really close to our funding goal.
What is the Kickstarter for, and what is your funding goal? When does it end?
So it's running this month, April 1st through 30th, and it's basically just to cover our operating costs. So we want to pay our writers, because writers deserve to be paid for their work. And then there's also some fees like, getting an ISBN, paying our cover artist because we have a wonderful human cover artist, and yeah, that sort of thing. So we're not actually making any money from it. All the fundraising is just going towards, paying writers and making the anthology happen, basically.
No, that's fantastic. I'll also add the link into the description so that people can see it and hopefully contribute to your fundraising and eventual publication goals for the anthology.
Thank you.
Uh,
Yeah, I'm really excited. I think the stories that our invited contributors have like pitched already are amazing, and like, the stories are going to be so much better than my short story.
no, don't say that. I mean, it's easy to like look down on our own work in comparison to others, but I'm sure it's wonderful.
Thank you.
Um, what other type of writing advice would you give to somebody who is either just starting out or approaching the querying process and just trying to figure out where their place is in this community?
I think the thing that has helped me the most with staying sane through all of it is kind of like leaning into the joy of writing. Like I struggled with publication stuff a while ago because I got it into my head. So like fantasy has always been like my first like literary love, but for a while I stopped writing fantasy because I had it in my head that it wasn't like serious enough or literary enough, and that I needed to be writing literary fiction. So I tried that for a while and it didn't really make me very happy. So I think both like what I've enjoyed the most and also what I've had the most success with are the things that are like the projects that are the most fun for me. 'Cause, you can't guarantee getting an agent, you can't guarantee getting a book deal, but at least you can have fun along the way.
No, I think that's really huge because there's so much in this craft and this experience that is just out of our control. Like you said, you can't guarantee you're ever going to get an agent, but you can enjoy the work that you're doing. You can enjoy the stories you're telling. And I guess along that vein is just the reminder that even if you don't get an agent or a book deal or something like that, it doesn't mean that your work or that your book is not valuable or that your thoughts are not valuable, which I think a lot of people kind of conflate in their heads where, oh, someone doesn't like my book, they don't like me, my thoughts are bad, I'm not good enough. Um, I think there's kind of a doom spiral that happens sometimes with that thought process. But if, as far as you be like, no, my book is good, my words are important. I might not be able to control somebody else's thought process as far as the marketing and whether it's, going to be sold on a mass scale that's worth the publisher coming and getting it. But the book itself and the joy I had writing into something that is always going to be interior and something you can control.
Yeah, absolutely.
Um, what would you suggest someone absolutely not do as far as this process is concerned?
Oh gosh.
Besides like maybe like the big obvious ones, but like something that's like maybe is something someone could easily stumble into.
Um, yeah, I mean that's a tough question. Yeah, there's so many like small things. I don't know, maybe not send a book to agents without editing it. I don't know.
No, I do think there is something in that where people finish the book and it's like, it's done. I'm good. That's their job. They'll edit it. That's why they're editors and I'm not. I do think I've seen a lot of people just like, my book is perfect as is. Go off. For your book with Behooved, is there anything that you would have changed about your experience with it, for better or for worse?
Um, I mean, I think I'm pretty happy with how it all ended up. And I wrote it from a place of excitement, and like I've always had like a lot of fun working on it. And that's not to say that, every word is like, a spurt of joy. Like, it's hard to do revisions and stuff too, but I think that I've had a lot of fun with the process, so I don't really regret that. And it all kind of just ended up working out well with timing. It kind of sucked that my first agent was not interested in working on it. So that really didn't feel good emotionally. But on the other hand, if that hadn't happened, then I wouldn't have been querying it at the exact right time. So
Fair enough. So Before we leave today, I just wanted to let you have the last word. Is there anything we haven't talked about that you'd like to say as your final thoughts for the day?
I guess I'd just like to mention one other resource that I have out there for writers. I have a website called the Querying Hub. It's queryinghub.wordpress.com, and there's a lot of talk about like, do you have to pay for editing services? Do you have to pay for, somebody to look at your query letter, etc. So what it is basically a database of 100% free resources for writers who are querying and researching agents.
Oh, that sounds fantastic and definitely very useful. I'll also add that into the description as well. Thank you again to M. Stevenson for joining us on today's episode of Lindsey Byrd in Writing is Hard. Please do check out the links in the description to find out how you can support the Enter Here anthology. And Behooved is out on the 20th of May in North America and the 22nd of May everywhere else. If you like this content, please do like and subscribe. And as always, stay happy and healthy. Bye for now.